Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? If you're watching this, this means I've made this video public. Otherwise, Anthony's just watching this video saying, "Hey kids, how you doing?" So, here's what happened. I had a conversation with him this morning, my morning, and I don't know if we were talking at cross purposes, or sometimes you know what it is, like you talk in Messenger or something like that, and sometimes it's very opaque and you don't really get your point across, or at least I didn't think I was entirely getting my point across. So, it's pretty much a rules question when it comes to Ubiquity. And, it's based on the idea that, my character in All for One is a combat monster. And because he has this talent, this dual talent of parry and riposte, where he parries as an automatic action instead of sacrificing an attack action to parry, in which case, when you parry in Ubiquity, you don't use your standard defense dice pool, which is usually smaller than somebody's attack pool. You use your attack dice pool, or something close to it. And that way you have more dice to pretty much avoid this attack, but you sacrifice your attack action. Philippe has a talent where he just does that as a reflexive action, so he doesn't have to roll his usual defense pool, which in his case is 5 dice. He rolls this parry pool, which is 11 dice, a lot bigger. He also has this talent called riposte, so any successes over what his opponent rolled as an attack that he rolls with his parry, they automatically count as damage towards his opponent. So you narrate it as he's able to slice past this other guy's blade and do damage to the guy that was attacking him. So in a sense, he gets 2 attacks per round, more or less. And one of the things I've noticed is he can accidentally kill somebody before he really wants them to. In 1 or 2 rounds, he can really dispatch a lot of people. And what if he wanted to keep them alive? What if that really wasn't his intent? So I started thinking to myself, there's got to be a way for him to pull his punches within the rules of Ubiquity and not just kind of hand wave it and make something up. So there's got to be something there. The first thing I was thinking of is like Subdual, the old rules from way back when with subduing dragons in first edition D&D and basic and all that kind of stuff, where you just kind of declare you're not doing real damage, you're doing subdual damage. Something in D20, which I've experienced a couple times, is the idea where you can choose to do non-lethal damage, which is different than non-lethal damage in Ubiquity, where you kind of bash somebody around with your weapon, but you take a -4 hit penalty. So there's some kind of penalty. I guess it makes sense to me. I don't know very much about swordplay, but I would think that it's got to be a little bit harder, maybe, to kind of pull your punch, so to speak, and instead of actually cutting the person, kind of just back off at the last second. Because part of my other intent was I thought it'd be neat for him to have the ability to kind of taunt his opponent. Not necessarily in a mechanical sense, although I'll talk about how that kind of pops up here as I looked at the rules. But just the idea that he can kind of fight somebody and let them know that he could kill them anytime he wants to. So he's just kind of getting there where he's just kind of like just about tapping them with his sword a little bit, where they know, or just kind of whacking their face, something where, or maybe it may just come really close, where they know this guy can get me anytime he wants to. So let's take a look at this mechanically. Philippe has a fencing rating of 8. And well, fencing is like a specialized form of melee. In All for One regime Diabolique, you can replace a melee score with a fencing score, and I'll explain why that's kind of cool. So just like melee, it's tabulated by taking your strength. In his case, it's 3, and then how many levels you've actually taken in melee or fencing. In which case, he's taken 5. So he has a total rating of 8. Then there are 5 different categories in fencing that you can. Were affected by the school. He's a member of the Renoir school of fencing. That's the style he uses. So when he thrusts, he gets a 0, no modifier. So he's rolling just rolling his regular fencing. If he slashes, then he gets a +1. He also gets a +1 to parry when he's trying to parry somebody's blow. Not as a defense, like rolling a regular defense pull, but when he's really deciding to go do an opposed roll. Like I described earlier. He gets a -1 to disarm. He's not as good as disarming his opponents. And he's -1 to feint, which that word appears nowhere else in the rules. It's a trick. I talked to Room Singer a long while ago. Say, what the heck is this? This is something like, it's a trick. And there are rules for tricks. And so, because you're kind of freak out your opponent for a little bit, which this kind of qualifies as. But anyhow, so what kind of die pools is he really rolling when it comes right down to it? When he thrusts, he's rolling his fencing rating, which is 8. +2 lethal, 2 more dice, because a rapier is 2 lethal. So he's rolling a 10 die pool when he's thrusting at somebody. When he's attacking somebody with a slash, he's rolling an 11 die pool, because he's rolling that 8 +2 for the rapier, +1, because you get a +1 for slash in their Renoir style. When he's parrying somebody, it's a little bit different. He uses his passive defense, which in this case is Philippe's body, so he has a rating of 2 in body. Then you add your fencing rating. So that's the whole thing. So that's 8, another 8 dice. And then that would be 10, but because he got a +1 at parry in the Winara School, now that's a plus another 1. So he's rolling 11 dice to parry. It's a big difference in rolling 5 dice, because Philippe's defense is a 5. He has a 2 body and a 3 dexterity. That's how you figure out your normal defense. So, I get 6 more dice just for having that talent. Now, when he wants to disarm somebody, which we're not really going to talk about, but I figure I'd put this in here anyway, you take your fencing rating, your melee rating, in this case fencing rating. A standard modifier you add to that is you take a -2 hit because you're trying to attack their weapon, is really what you're trying to do. So now you're talking about having 6 dice, and also because Philippe is a member of the Renard School, he takes another -1. Now he's only using 5 dice. Now feint, if he's actually using melee as a feint, he's really just using his fencing rating, so he's taking 8 plus a -1 hit because he has -1 to feint. So if he's trying to do some kind of trick with, as far as I understand it, with his fencing ability, then he's only rolling 7 dice to actually do this trick. But let's talk about what the heck I'm really talking about here. And there's two separate instances when he might want to pull his punch and not really hurt the guy, but just kind of taunt him a little bit. The first one would be just attacking him. And let's just go with, at this point, we're going to say we're going to do a feint. We're going to attack him that way, and just kind of there's a example. When I didn't have this example when I was talking to Runeslinger, page 101, there's an example of doing tricks, and the example of doing tricks in All for One is actually a guy pretty much doing a Zorro thing. The guy's name is Xavier, but he carves an X into this guy's tunic. So he's able to use this guy actually uses melee rating because I guess he didn't have a fencing. But okay, let's go with Philippe's rating of 7. So okay, he can go do this, and if he's able to beat this guy's opposed roll, then he can actually do something cool. So in this particular case, he's doing this little zap with his clothes. It's a touch attack, so it's not even an opposed roll. In that case, because it's a touch attack, the defender. This is where it gets weirder than what I thought it was, or more advantageous for Philippe. And this is one of my questions. The defender is only able to use their active defense. They're not going to use their passive defense. It's just a touch attack. Their body really has nothing to do with it. So let's take an average guy that's has a defense of 4, 2 body, 2 dexterity. In this case, this guy's only rolling 2 dice, and Philippe is rolling 7. And should he roll more successes, then his opponent, according to this, is stunned. They say he just taps him on the face, just gives him a little like, hey, I could have got you, just boinks him in the chest. The attacker is supposed to be stunned. Now, if I look up, earlier in the book on what stunned really means, and that's more like taking your stun rating, but you lose your next action, because every round in Ubiquity or turn, there's 3 actions: an attack action, a defense action, and a move action. I'm not sure if that just means you can't act for the rest of the turn, or whether you lose the next action you were going to do. Not really sure. That's one of my questions. However, also, it handles, All for One handles tricks differently than Leagues of Adventure. And I think another Ubiquity game that I recall correctly. And if you roll more than double the successes that your attacker rolled, then you would actually they would lose their active defense until the end of the next round. So a little bit different. It's a little ambiguous in terms of what happens. But regardless, I think of it as the Dragon Ball Z thing. One way that either way, where the guy just kind of looks there like for 1 second and is kind of unable to act. So that wasn't really my intent when I was starting this, but it seems like the rules support that could happen. I really don't care either way. Just I want the idea is I want Philippe to be able to kind of taunt somebody, or decide maybe not to kill them. Now, when he's actually doing a parry, this is where it gets a little bit dicier in terms of how does this really work. So if you recall, Philippe has a parry rating of 11. Now I'm thinking, first thing I would do is I'm going to take away 1 die because he's not really parrying anymore. So we can't really give him the bonus for that. So maybe he's using a 10 die pool. Then I'm going to take away another die because he's really feinting, and he's not as good at feinting. So maybe he's rolling a 9 die pool. I'm not really sure what to do in that case. Now he isn't rolling against, in this case, he's not really rolling against the defender's defense, or passive defense, or active defense in this case, like he was when he was attacking him, because the person is actually attacking him. He's doing a opposed roll with him. So I thought, man, having this 9-die pool seems awful heavy. Like maybe I should just take another -2 off to make it on a parity with when he's attacking and have a 7-die pool both ways. However, at this point, the person he's trying to taunt is using a much larger die pool. Because in general, in Ubiquity, you're using the larger die pool to attack with than you are to defend with. It's one of the reasons the game is pretty lethal. So I'm thinking, in this case, Philippe is using the 9-die pool to kind of taunt his opponent, when all he's really doing is just avoiding their attack and doing that little riposte. So, say he scores more successes than his opponent does, and he still kind of, gets it in there and just says, hey, could have got you that time, but I chose not to. The other question I have, or I'm wondering, is there any other way to decide that maybe you're not trying to taunt the person, but you want to make sure that you don't kill them? Say you roll, I'm Philippe and I roll like 5 more successes than my opponent, and it's going to kill them, or at least get them to below 0. Is there a way to decide, hey, I don't want to hurt them that badly. That wasn't my intent. I just wanted to hurt them a little bit and make them surrender. Is that something where I need to roll a smaller die pool voluntarily to say, hey, I really don't want to attack them that badly? Which might, I'm not sure if I'd want to do that, but if that would be the correct ruling. I'm not sure. Or whether I'd have to say, hey, I know I scored 5 lethal here, but I really only like to score 2, and just kind of hand wave it. Or do I need to do something like use style points to kind of buy back some of those injuries that I inflicted on somebody else? So, yeah, kind of an interesting question. But, to me, that whole little vibe of somebody dancing around somebody and sort of taunting them a little bit, that's very musketeer-y when it comes right down to it. I forget which year version of the Musketeers you're watching. Was it one of the older ones, one of the more famous ones, where D'Artagnan is just toying with one of his opponents, and that just to me that's a kind of vibe I'm really kind of looking for with this. I wasn't looking so much for the mechanical trick, where the opponent is stunned, although it's not anywhere near as not damaging, but it doesn't have anywhere near the mechanical effect in All for One that it does in something like Leagues of Adventure. They can be stunned for several rounds. Or just unable to act. Here it just seems like it's pretty fast, like you just surprised the guy. Wasn't really my intent. However, I'll take it if the rules support it. So, what do you think? Is this kosher, or am I getting something wrong?